So last month I was at Venerable Seppel's full ordination in Taiwan, and then shortly after I returned, we ordained Christina, who is now Venerable Kunga. So one thing that's been on my mind quite a bit is this whole question of monastic lineage and transmission. And in thinking about this, I remember when I was a lay Buddhist attending a Buddhist youth group, one day someone asked the teacher, how do you know the Buddha exists? And our teacher, who is a monk, at the time he said, well, if you look at the monastics around you, every single fully ordained bhikshu required 5 other bhikshus to give him the full ordination. And so he said, by extension, you can deduce that for every monk to exist, there had to be at least 5 other monks who came before him. Now, that's in an area where the Buddha Dharma is not flourishing, right? They call it like a distant land. If you're in a central land, you need at least 10 bhikshus to give the full ordination. So by extension, right, for every monk to exist, there must have been 5 who came before him, and so on. And you can trace that all the way back to Shakyamuni Buddha's time. And for some reason, as a new Buddhist, I was very inspired by this. Just the idea that seeing that there are monastics walking the earth now is proof that Shakyamuni Buddha did the same thing, that he also practiced as a human being and ordained monastics, and that lineage has passed on till today. And at the same time, our teacher pointed out the fragility of the monastic lineage, that if there should come a day where there are less than 5 fully ordained monks, then you can't give the ordination anymore. The Sangha will just die out as a result, if that cause is no longer there. And you can see that in terms of the Bhikshuni lineage, right? That has died out in some traditions, because you not only need the 5 bhikshus, you also need at least 5 bhikshunis to give the full ordination to nuns. And again, that's in a distant land where the Dharma is not flourishing. So it happened that in the Theravada and Tibetan traditions, the Bhikshuni lineage is no longer extant. So in thinking about this, I also read a paper by Venerable Heng Ching, one of the Vinaya teachers of the Abbey, about lineage and transmission. And in it, she captures the stories of the first Chinese bhikshunis. So that's what I wanted to share today. So the story of the first Chinese Buddhist bhikshuni, her name was Jing Jian. And she was born as the daughter of a magistrate in 291 CE. She was diligent in learning in her childhood and became widowed at an early age. And she taught music, writing, and reading to the children of the wealthy and nobility. And although she took delight in learning Buddhism, she found no teacher to give her instruction. But at last, she met a monk named Fa Shi, who was well versed in Buddhist scriptures, and she studied with him. And one day she said to him, since the scriptures mention that there are bhikshus and bhikshunis, I wish to be ordained as a bhikshuni. So quite remarkable, right, that this thought could occur just inspired by reading scripture, not having seen another nun. She thought, I want to become one. And so her teacher Fa Shi told her, although there were bhikshus and bhikshunis in India, in China the precepts were incomplete. Nonetheless, he agreed to make inquiries about the bhikshuni precepts and ordination on her behalf. So he asked a monk named Janagira, who was from Kashmir, and this monk explained, the precepts for bhikshunis are basically the same as those for the bhikshus, but without the proper procedures, nobody can confer the precepts. The nuns can take the 10 precepts from the bhikshu sangha. However, they will have no bhikshuni preceptors to depend upon for their studies. Nevertheless, Jing Jian, together with 24 other women, were ordained by Janagira and took the 10 precepts of a shramaneri. And then some years later, in 357 CE, the Indian monk Dharmagupta was invited to Luoyang to set up a precept platform to give the bhikshuni ordination. And there was a Chinese monk who objected, probably because you had to, aside from the bhikshus, there were no bhikshunis in China at the time to give the ordination. But nonetheless, the ordination ceremony went ahead despite those objections and was performed on a ship in the middle of a river. So when we were at the full ordination, Master Panin pointed out that sometimes you can set up a territory on like a boat or a place like that if you're worried about people opposing the ordination. Yeah, so it went ahead. And here we can think about, just the compassion, I think, of these monks from foreign lands who wanted to support the growth of the Sangha in China. And too, I was inspired thinking about this nun who basically had a very good life, right? It seemed, in a worldly, material way, and who had no teacher but somehow found one and had this aspiration to become a nun, which clearly must have been imprints from past lives. So in any case, even if the monks alone give the full ordination, it is still valid, but the preceptors incur a fault, and we'll come to that later. So it took about half a century before the first dual ordination of bhikshunis happened in China. So in 429 CE, a foreign boat captain named Nandi brought 8 Buddhist bhikshunis from Sri Lanka to the capital of the Song dynasty. It's not recorded why. I mean, it's kind of amazing to think of these 8 women getting on this boat and surviving the journey. And when they were in China, they stayed at Luminous Blessings Monastery. And so they asked a Chinese nun named Seng Guo, "Have foreign nuns ever been here before us?" And Seng Guo answered, "There were none. There had been none." The Sri Lankan bhikshunis then asked, if that was the case, how had the Chinese nuns taken full ordination from both the bhikshu and bhikshuni sanghas? And Seng Guo replied, they had taken the full ordination just from the bhikshu sangha, taking the case of the first nun, Mahapajapati Gotami, as a good example and precedent. However, she had some doubts, this Seng Guo, and so she consulted with a Vinaya master, Gunavarman, who was also from Kashmir. She asked him whether the single ordination taken by the Chinese bhikshunis was valid. Gunavarman said, as the bhikshuni ordination is finalized by the bhikshu sangha, even if the ordination from the bhikshuni sangha is not conferred, the bhikshuni ordination still results in pure vows, just as in the case of Mahapajapati. Then Seng Guo asked him whether it was possible to reordain, and Gunavarman replied, very good. If you wish to increase your wisdom by retaking the ordination, I am glad to offer my help. However, since the Sri Lankan bhikshunis, who are in China now, have not yet reached their precept age, and their number is less than 10, they should first start learning the Chinese language. Yeah, so in order for someone to become a qualified preceptor, they have to have held the full ordination for a certain number of years. So here, it's not written down, but we can imagine what could it have been like, right, for these quite young in ordination Sri Lankan bhikshunis to be in this foreign land. And then now they have to learn Chinese. I mean, it's not an easy language to learn. But of course, out of faith, I'm sure, and the wish to spread the Sangha, that's what they did. And then 4 years later, the same ship captain Nandi, brought back 11 more bhikshunis from Sri Lanka. And by this time, the bhikshunis who had arrived earlier had become fluent in Chinese, but Gunavarman had passed away. Thus, Seng Guo and the other Chinese bhikshunis requested the Indian Vinaya master Sanghavarman to preside over the dual ordination at the ceremonial platform in Nanlin Monastery. Altogether, more than 300 women were ordained by both sanghas. This marked the beginning of the proper transmission of dual ordination for women in China, that is, of receiving the precepts from both bhikshu and bhikshuni sanghas. So anyhow, I like thinking about how this whole global transmission of Buddhism has been ongoing for so many centuries. And for Buddhism to spread, you need these dedicated practitioners, whether to cross mountains, take death-defying journeys by sea. And they did so with great conviction in the three jewels and this very sincere wish to support other monastics and to ensure the flourishing of the Buddha Dharma. I wonder too, if, just to think, like 300 women took the dual Sangha ordination. So I'm sure the presence of the Sri Lankan bhikshunis in China must have had a profound impact, right? For the Chinese women to see, oh, these are what nuns look like. This is how they live together. This is how they practice. We could become nuns too, hey, right? To have that living example. And I think we see that here too at the Abbey, right? When I often hear from the seniors here, when the first group of 4 Chinese bhikshunis came, it was like, oh, there was some kind of inspirational impact in seeing, oh, that's what it looks like when they're a group. We could have a group of us too. And now we do. And it has a very deep impact, I think, watching groups of monastics behaving, how we live and practice together. So I feel very fortunate to be part of this process of transmission. And of course, we have a lot of gratitude to all these practitioners who came before us. And I guess that's what we can keep in mind, especially with Chinese Vesak Day being tomorrow, that we can have gratitude for this whole lineage of practitioners going all the way back to the Buddha, and we can rejoice in our ability to contribute to the continued transmission of the Dharma in the world.